Don't flinch. Keep scrolling. No, stop. That tightening right there, the way your jaw set without asking permission. I'm noticing it as I speak because it's happening to me too, and I didn't expect it to. I was just standing here, still, face quiet, thinking about nothing in particular, when a thought slid in sideways and my shoulders dropped a fraction like they were tired of holding up a ceiling. Nobody looks at, and I'm here now, present, noticing how often I clear my throat when there's nothing to say, noticing the way my hand hovers near my pocket like it might need to grab something invisible, noticing how familiar it feels to pretend this is just another passing video, another voice, another nothing. But it isn't landing like nothing, it's landing like recognition does, late and unwelcome, and I'm not trying to convince you of anything, I'm just describing what I'm watching happen in real time. Because I've watched it happen in rooms full of people who don't know it's happening to them. I've watched it happen in mirrors, when the light is bad and the house is quiet and the phone is face down because the screen feels too bright, and I'm watching it happen right now in my own chest as I talk about men who don't break loudly, men who don't explode or disappear, men who do everything right for so long that right becomes a cage with padded walls, and the padding works until it doesn't, because padding still steals oxygen, just slower. And the first sign isn't a scream, it's a pause, a hesitation before answering a question you've answered 1,000 times. It's the way your mouth says, "I'm good," before you check if that's still true. It's the way you learn to read rooms so well you forget what you feel in them. And somewhere in the middle of all that competence and calm, you pick up a belief, without realizing it's a belief. You pick up the idea that being useful is the same as being valued, that being steady is the same as being loved, that if you don't need anything, then you won't cost anyone anything. And that belief works. It really does. It builds a life that looks solid from the outside. It keeps people safe. It keeps things moving. It earns nods and gratitude and silence. And I used to think that silence was peace. I really did. I thought the absence of conflict meant success. And that's the belief I'm holding up here. The one that says if you're needed, you're okay. If you're relied on, you're alive. If you're the rock, then you won't sink. And I'm noticing how convincing it still sounds when I say it out loud. How part of me wants to keep it. Because it explains why the days feel full even when the nights feel hollow, and I'm watching the moment when that belief starts to crack. Not all at once, not dramatically, but like a hairline fracture that only shows up when the temperature changes, and the temperature always changes around 40. Not because of a number, but because time finally gives you enough distance to see the pattern you've been repeating without calling it a pattern. You wake up one morning and nothing is wrong. That's the problem. Nothing is wrong, and yet something feels off. The room feels different all of a sudden, not scary, just unfamiliar, like furniture shifted while you were asleep, and you go through the motions anyway because that's what you do. You make breakfast, you answer emails, you show up, you solve things, and all the while there's a quiet second inside where a question forms without words, a question that isn't, "What do I want?" because you don't ask that anymore. It's more like, "When did I stop being here?" And that's when the body reacts first, before the mind catches up. A tightness in the chest you misread as stress, a headache you blame on sleep, a short fuse you call normal, and you handle it. Because handling things is your skill, and handling it becomes the wrong reaction. Because it fractures something you don't know how to name. It fractures the image of yourself as someone who is fine, and the fracture doesn't bleed. It echoes, and the echo follows you into small private moments that feel embarrassing to admit. Like standing in the grocery store staring at the same shelf for too long, because you can't remember what you came for. Like sitting in the car after turning the engine off and not opening the door right away, like scrolling alone at night and feeling a flush of shame at nothing specific. Just the sense that you are late to your own life. And I'm not diagnosing anything here, I'm just watching. I'm watching some men hit a wall they didn't know they were building, a wall made of good decisions and patience and swallowed reactions, a wall that kept everyone else safe and slowly boxed them in. And I'm noticing how often people misread what happens next. They call it a crisis. They laugh about it. They point to cars and haircuts and affairs, and that explanation is convenient because it keeps the real thing invisible. It keeps the grief unnamed. Because grief sounds dramatic, and this doesn't look dramatic. This looks like a man doing his job and coming home tired. This looks like someone who never learned how to take up space without apologizing for it. This looks like kindness that was never meant to be currency but got spent that way anyway. And here's the part that feels wrong to say but feels truer the longer I sit with it. Appreciation that arrives late doesn't land the same. It bounces, it slides off, because the cost was already paid in silence, and there's a moment, usually alone, when that lands. When you realize the sacrifice you thought was invisible was actually expected. An expectation doesn't feel like love when you're the one carrying it. There was a quiet second, and everything clicked. Not in a satisfying way, more like a dull thud. And that's when the belief I mentioned earlier breaks apart. The belief that being useful is enough. Because you can be indispensable and still feel replaceable. You can be the one everyone leans on and still have nowhere to lean yourself. And that realization doesn't make you angry right away. It makes you empty, and emptiness is harder to explain than anger. Emptiness doesn't give you a script, it just sits there. Heavy silence, the kind that presses on the ears, and you try to fill it with things that used to work. More responsibility, more effort, more being good, and it doesn't fill, it leaks. And somewhere after the midpoint of this feeling, after you've tried to outwork it, outrun it, out-nice it, you finally name it once, quietly, almost ashamed of the word. You think, I became the good man, and saying it doesn't feel like praise, it feels like a diagnosis, because good in this context meant quiet, reliable, self-erasing. It meant being chosen for what you provided instead of who you were, and I'm watching how that name carries weight when it shows up late, how it explains decades and excuses nothing. And I'm also watching how tempting it is to romanticize the snap, to imagine a single breaking point, a clean line where before was patience and after is freedom. But that's not what I see. What I see is a slow grieving for a life you didn't know you were allowed to want. Grief for the versions of yourself that never made it past courtesy. Grief for the risks you didn't take because they might inconvenience someone else. And that grief is quiet too. It doesn't announce itself. It shows up as irritation at small things, as distance you can't explain, as a strange jealousy when you see someone younger make a selfish choice without apology, and you judge them for it while part of you aches, because you recognize something you buried. And here's the contradiction that catches people off guard. You can love the people you built your life for and still mourn the life you didn't build for yourself. Both can be true at the same time, and holding both at once feels like trying to breathe underwater. Sharp silence, and when you finally exhale, just once, it feels like relief and betrayal in the same breath. And I notice how often men flinch at that, how quickly they shut it down, because betrayal sounds like blame, and blame sounds like bitterness, and bitterness feels dangerous, so they retreat back into competence, back into being needed. Because being needed has rules, and wanting doesn't. And this is the moment most people never notice. The moment where avoidance quietly locks the pattern in place, because ignoring this doesn't make it go away. It just makes it repeat with more pressure. And I'm not offering a way out, I don't have one to hand you. I'm just staying with the observation that the snap everyone jokes about isn't about wanting more. It's about realizing how much you gave without being seen, and how much of yourself went missing while you were busy being acceptable. And there's an unforgettable sentence that keeps looping in my head when I watch this unfold. A sentence that doesn't comfort me, it corners me. You can survive a life that never belonged to you, but it will collect interest. And that interest comes due when the distractions stop working, when the kids grow up, or the job plateaus, or the body doesn't bounce back the way it used to. And suddenly there's space. And space is loud when you're not used to hearing yourself. And some people will disagree with this. They'll say sacrifice is noble, that this is just maturity, that emptiness is normal. And maybe they're right in a way that doesn't help, because normal doesn't mean harmless, and nobility doesn't refill what was drained. And I'm watching how that disagreement itself becomes a shield, a way to avoid the discomfort of looking straight at the cost. And I'm aware that as I say this, part of you might be pushing back, thinking, this isn't you. This feels familiar. I don't like how accurate this is. I can't unsee this. And I'm not asking you to resolve that ladder. I'm just noticing it appear, rung by rung. And I'm noticing how the shame returns later. Not now while you're listening, but later when you're alone and scrolling and a line from this drifts back without context. Something like being good made me disappear. 7 words that don't tell you what to do but won't leave you alone. And that line is remixable, unfinished, because it points without concluding. And I'm noticing how the ending of this doesn't want to close, how any attempt to wrap it up would feel false. Because this isn't a story that ends cleanly. It's a pattern that either tightens or loosens over time, and I can't see which way it goes from here. I just know that right when you think it's over, it isn't, and I'm standing in that not over space right now, still, feeling the weight of what hasn't been said, feeling the pull to soften it and choosing not to, because softening it would be another way of being nice. And I'm not sure that's what's needed anymore, and the silence changed before the truth did, and I'm leaving it there. Not as a lesson, not as a warning, just as something present, something unresolved, something that might come back to you when you're not looking for it, when the room feels different again and you can't remember why.